Only in this world, the man said, his laughter slicing through the room like a blade. Would a maid's daughter think she deserves a seat among kings? The translators chuckled. The investors followed, and soon the entire boardroom echoed with polished, polite laughter, the kind that hides venom behind expensive smiles. Naomi Reed didn't move. She sat at the end of the long mahogany table, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. The only sound was the quiet tap of her pen against the glossy folder that carried the weight of a $900 million merger. They thought she didn't understand a word of Mandarin. They thought her silence was ignorance. They were wrong, because Naomi understood every syllable, every insult disguised as humor, every condescending smirk exchanged across the table. But more than that, she understood timing. The man speaking, Li Jin, heir to one of Asia's most powerful energy conglomerates, leaned back in his leather chair, confident in his empire, certain in his superiority. His colleagues nodded along, some out of loyalty, others out of fear. Naomi's eyes drifted toward the window. Beijing's skyline gleamed outside. All glass and steel, ambition and arrogance intertwined. Inside, the air was colder. He had called her servant, but she saw what he really was. A man begging for relevance in a world moving faster than his pride could handle. "Miss Reed," Lee said suddenly, switching back to English with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps you'd like to fetch us more tea before we continue?" A ripple of laughter again. Cameras flashed, and in that moment every smile in that room became a mask of complicity. Naomi finally looked up, her dark eyes calm, steady, and dangerously composed. She smiled once, small, deliberate, and beneath her breath so softly no one heard, she whispered in perfect Mandarin, "Careful with your words, Chairman. You never know who's listening." The laughter didn't stop. Not yet. They still believed she was just a guest at their table, unaware that in less than 24 hours she'd own it. The jet sliced through clouds like a blade through silk. Inside, Naomi Reed sat at the long walnut table, pages of contracts spread before her like a map of war. The cabin hummed with the quiet rhythm of luxury. Soft leather seats, the scent of black coffee, and the faint glow of city lights far below. Her assistant, Maya Collins, glanced up from her laptop. "You've been at those documents for 5 hours, Naomi. Maybe rest before landing." Naomi didn't look up. Her pen moved with measured precision, her mind sharper than exhaustion. "My mother used to say," she murmured, "predators hunt the second you blink." Maya smiled faintly. And what did she know about predators? Everything. Naomi closed the folder carefully. She cleaned their houses. The silence that followed was thick, filled with unspoken history. The daughter of a maid, now leading a $900 million deal that could redefine renewable energy across continents. Every page in front of her was a reminder of how far she'd climbed, and how far some men would go to push her back down. She stood, poured herself a glass of water, and looked out the window. The moonlight painted the clouds silver, and her reflection stared back, poised, unflinching. "They'll underestimate you." Her mother's voice echoed in memory, gentle but firm. "Let them. It's easier to win when they never see you coming." The intercom crackled softly. "We'll be descending into Shanghai in 30 minutes, Dr. Reed." She straightened her blazer, set the glass down, and spoke as if to herself. "If they expect a servant, then I'll serve them a lesson." Her assistant looked up. "What kind of lesson?" Naomi's gaze never left the window. "The expensive kind." Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere over the horizon, distant but coming closer. The flash of cameras greeted her before the air did. The moment Naomi stepped off the jet, a dozen reporters shouted questions in Mandarin and English. Microphones rose like spears. Smiles gleamed like mirrors, reflecting charm, concealing motives. Li Jian stood at the center of it all, perfectly tailored, perfectly practiced. His handshake lingered a second too long, his eyes assessing rather than greeting. "Welcome to Shanghai, Dr. Reed," he said, his English smooth but heavy with pride. "We're honored by your visit." "Thank you," Naomi replied, her voice silk over steel. "Let's make it worth the flight." The photographers clicked furiously as they walked toward the waiting convoy of black cars. Between flashes, she caught the faint sneer at the corner of his mouth, the kind of smile men wear when they believe they're 2 moves ahead. Inside the car, Maya whispered, "He called you Hey Nu Ren, black woman," under his breath when you shook his hand. Naomi didn't flinch. "Good," she said quietly. "Let him think I don't understand." Shanghai unfolded beyond the tinted glass, towers and neon, the pulse of ambition. But beneath it all, Naomi could feel something colder, an undercurrent of arrogance, ancient and alive. Lee's voice came through the intercom. "You'll find our hospitality generous. We value partnerships, especially with companies that understand their place." Naomi turned her head slightly, her reflection gliding across the window. "I find that partnerships work best," she said softly, "when both sides stand." He laughed, not realizing the line had already drawn blood. As the convoy rolled through the city, she rested her hand on the leather briefcase beside her. Inside it, the contract, the patents, and a small silver recorder no one knew was running. Hospitality, she thought, watching the skyline glow. Let's see how it tastes when the laughter stops. The banquet hall shimmered with gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like honey over polished marble. Laughter, delicate and false, floated through the air. Naomi sat near the center of the long table, surrounded by executives in designer suits and Western investors who smiled too much. Li Jian presided at the head, his charm now laced with wine and confidence. "To new beginnings," he toasted, raising his glass. "To mutual respect," Naomi replied evenly, her voice calm but resonant. He chuckled. "Ah, yes, respect. In our culture, we say respect is earned by knowing one's place." A ripple of laughter. A few Western faces turned uneasy. Most joined in. No one wanted to be the only one not laughing. Naomi smiled, serene. "And in mine," she said, "we say respect is lost the moment you demand it." The laughter stuttered, then recovered, awkward, thin. Between courses, the conversation shifted to American diversity policies, women in leadership, and how representation looks good in the media. Lee's voice grew louder. "Each joke sharper. She's very impressive," one man murmured. Truly a symbol of progress. Naomi set her glass down with precision. "Progress," she said softly, "isn't a symbol. It's a standard." The table fell silent for a moment. Lee broke it with another chuckle, switching to Mandarin, his words too fast for most of the Western guests. "So confident, this one. I suppose cleaning houses builds character." Laughter followed. Naomi didn't blink. Her breathing stayed even. Her eyes flicked briefly to Maya, who met her gaze, silently recording everything. Every insult. Every word. The servers replaced their plates with steaming bowls of shark fin soup, tradition dressed as power. Lee raised his spoon and said, "To adaptation. Even the West learns respect when it comes to business." Naomi's smile didn't falter. "Adaptation," she echoed. "A beautiful thing. When evolution doesn't expose extinction." He laughed again, but this time others didn't join as quickly. A subtle tension crept in, coiling like smoke. She leaned back, her fingers brushing the silver recorder under the table. The dinner wasn't just a meal. It was a mirror, and soon every reflection in it would break. Wine glimmered like blood beneath the chandelier. Conversation dulled into the hum of indulgence. Then, between one sip and the next, Lee leaned toward his colleagues, his voice dropping into Mandarin. "Hey Nu Yong Ren," he said. "Black servant." Laughter again. Sharp, gleaming, cruel. Naomi's spoon paused just above the bowl. The room tilted into slow motion. She could hear the laughter echoing, bouncing off the crystal and glass until it became something hollow, something ancient. Her pulse slowed. She inhaled once, deeply. The voice in her mind, her mother's voice, whispered through memory. "Baby, don't fight noise with noise. Let silence do the cutting." She placed the spoon down gently. "Excuse me," she said, her tone soft, steady, unbroken. "I need to take this call." Lee nodded mockingly. "Ah, American urgency," he sneered. "Always busy, never patient." The laughter followed her as she walked out, past the servers, past the cameras, past the marble pillars that seemed to watch her go. In the corridor, Naomi stopped. The laughter faded behind her, replaced by her own heartbeat. Calm, deliberate, like the ticking of a clock that belonged only to her. She took out her phone, pressed stop on the recorder, and smiled. "Loud words," she murmured. "From small men." Through the grand doors behind her, they still laughed, thinking she was defeated. They didn't know that every word had already been captured. Every insult, every chuckle. All evidence of the empire they had just destroyed with their own tongues. Naomi checked her reflection in a gilded mirror, straightened her emerald dress, and whispered in Mandarin, "Let's begin." Then she turned, her heels echoing like a countdown as she walked back toward the dining room. Not to defend herself, but to deliver the silence they had mistaken for weakness. Because when Naomi Reed spoke again, the world would listen. The room fell quiet the moment she re-entered. The laughter, still lingering, died mid-breath. Naomi Reed walked with the slow certainty of someone who had already won. Li Jian turned toward her with a smirk. "Ah, Dr. Reed, you're back. We were wondering if—" She raised a hand gently, cutting him off, not with anger, but with elegance. Then, in flawless Mandarin, her voice rolled across the table. "Thank you for this wonderful meal. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed listening to your opinions." The words landed like glass shattering in silence. The room froze. Forks halted midair. A single drop of wine fell and spread like ink across the tablecloth. Naomi's tone didn't change. Calm, measured, precise. "Before we proceed," she continued, still in Mandarin, "I'd like to clarify something. I am not a guest here. I am the CEO of the company that was about to acquire yours. But not anymore." The translator hesitated, unsure whether to speak. Naomi turned to him and smiled softly. "No need to translate. They understand me now." Lee's face drained of color. He stammered something, half an apology, half confusion. Naomi placed her silver recorder on the table and pressed play. His own voice filled the room. Black servant. The laughter that followed, their laughter, echoed now like ghosts in a tomb. "Effective immediately," she said. Still in Mandarin, "The merger is terminated. My legal team will contact you about the defamation clauses you seem to have ignored." And then, the final line, the one she'd saved for last. "A servant doesn't end billion-dollar deals. But I just did." She gathered her documents, nodded politely, and turned to leave. Behind her, panic began to spread. Phones lit up. Every empire has an earthquake. And this one had just begun. By morning, the video had leaked. A clip, 30 seconds long, of the dinner, the laughter, the slur, and Naomi's calm, fluent Mandarin response. No one knew who had released it. No one had to. The internet did what it always does. It judged. And it remembered. Headlines exploded across every major business outlet. CEO walks out on $900 deal after racial slur. Entire board under fire. She spoke Mandarin. They spoke disrespect. Shares in Li Jian's conglomerate dropped 12% overnight. Investors demanded statements. Apologies flooded social media, written by PR teams too late to matter. Naomi sat in her office, high above Manhattan, calm amid the chaos. Her assistant entered quietly. "You're trending in 36 countries. They're calling you the Silent Storm." Naomi's lips curved faintly. "Storms don't trend," she said. "They pass." The news channels replayed her words endlessly. Pundits debated cultural arrogance, racism in global business, and the cost of underestimation. Li Jian appeared on camera, rehearsed and pale, calling it a misunderstanding. But no one believed him. The footage of his smirk had already told the truth. Naomi turned to the window, the skyline glowing beneath her. "It's not about revenge," she said softly. "It's about accountability." Maya approached with another folder. "We found something," she said. "Internal emails. One of our own board members leaked your travel details. He was coordinating with them." Naomi took the folder, flipped it open, and read in silence. Her expression didn't change. Only her eyes hardened slightly. "Then our storm isn't over," she said. "It's only moving inland. Outside, rain streaked the glass. Inside, the calm before her next strike began to take shape." 3 days later, the world watched as Naomi Reed walked into an emergency shareholder meeting. Cameras flashed, board members whispered, and somewhere deep in the hierarchy of her own company, the traitor waited. The man's name was Richard Hale, senior executive, former ally. He looked confident, the kind of confidence only the guilty wear before they fall. Naomi placed a stack of documents on the table. "Before we begin," she said, "there's something everyone here deserves to hear." She pressed a button on the screen behind her. An email appeared, then another. Each message showed coordination between Richard and Li Jian's team, data leaks, meeting schedules, private recordings. The room erupted. Richard stammered. "You can't. These were taken out of context." Naomi spoke over him, calm as ever. "Context?" she repeated. "You sold our integrity for stock options." Silence. She continued. "While they mocked me for being a servant, you volunteered to serve them. And that's the difference, Richard. They laughed because they underestimated me. You betrayed because you feared me." He tried to speak, but words failed. Naomi turned to the board. Effective immediately, he suspended pending legal action. The chair nodded. "Approved." Richard stood, but no one met his eyes. The guards escorted him out as cameras clicked. When the door closed, Naomi exhaled softly and looked around the table. "We talk about diversity as image," she said. "But real diversity is integrity under pressure. It's what you do when respect isn't given freely." Someone whispered, "What now?" Naomi smiled. "Now we rebuild, without arrogance, without fear, and without anyone pretending to be king." The meeting adjourned. Outside, journalists swarmed the lobby. Naomi didn't stop for interviews. She simply walked through the flashes, calm, composed, untouchable. That night she issued a single statement to the press. "They called me a servant. I served justice instead, and with that, the story no longer belonged to them. It belonged to history." A week later, Naomi stood in her mother's old neighborhood, the air filled with the laughter of children chasing basketballs down cracked pavement. The foundation she'd built, the Reed Initiative, had just opened a new technology center for underprivileged youth. A bright sign read, "Where greatness begins quietly." She knelt beside a little girl holding a tablet. "What do you want to build?" Naomi asked. The child grinned. "A robot that speaks every language." Naomi smiled softly. "Then make sure it listens too. The world needs more of that." As cameras captured the moment, Naomi looked up at the sky, the same sky her mother had once stared at from someone else's kitchen window. Her voice, low and steady, carried the final words of her story. "Some people will always see you as what they expect, until excellence forces them to see the truth. Don't argue with ignorance. Outgrow it." She turned, waving to the crowd, her figure framed by sunlight and hope. "Where you're from doesn't define where you'll rise. Comment where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story will remind you again that silence is never weakness. It's power waiting to speak.